This is the part that's going to make or break your trailer boat experience. So there's a few pointers here in relation to how to set up our hitches that are actually going to help you make it more pleasurable and especially safe. Chances are your insurance company is going to require you to have one of these type of contraptions on your drawbar of your trailer. Now it's a safety lock, an anti-theft lock, and some of these are designed to be installed on the tow hitch as well. I prefer not to do that, just in case I really need to get into extremely tight turns. So trailer the boat, I remove it, but at home make sure that you've got it on all of the time. It's installed with a padlock into the side, and it has a crossbar there that locks it in on top of the actual hitch. Once we install the lock back in there so we don't lose it, we're then ready to drop the hitch down onto the ball. Now this is a 50mm ball, which is a standard size ball that you'll get with most trailer boats, especially in that range of 6.5 to 7 metres. They can pull quite a fair bit of weight, and if you're going to have a bigger boat, well, you start to get up into the 75 to 90mm size. Now you'll note that this one's fairly messy and it's covered in grease, and it's really important to keep these things greased because you have two metal parts working on each other. While this is made out of cast metal, this is turned out of solid steel, and if we can actually keep that greased, you'll find that you get a lot less wear and tear. If you do get that wear and tear, you'll find that you'll start getting a lot of clunking and banging and crashing at the back when you're towing, and that's the hitch rocking backwards and forwards on the ball. A little bit of grease goes a long way to getting rid of that, but it's messy. And if you don't take your removable trailer tow hitch assembly off each time you fish or finish fishing, you'll find that you're going to have to cover it up with one of these caps. Not a problem, saves getting all your strides dirty all of the time. So we're ready to drop the hitch back down, and you can see I've got it pulled up, and by lowering it down, take it right to the bottom and you'll see it catches on there. Once you've done that, before you do anything else, make sure you do that. It's important because otherwise you'll take off, you'll have the hitch jump up, you put the brakes on, and even though you've got safety chains attached, you'll drive that straight through the back door of your car or the boot assembly. Now having done that, it's a good idea to make a point of fastening something on here so that it can't ride itself loose. I use a padlock simply because it gives you a bit more security back at the boat ramp. Drop the padlock onto that. That's ready to go. It can't come off now, and provided we've got the nut on the bottom assembly of the ball done up nice and tight, we won't have any problems with this. Now, we've got the brake reversing attachment there to allow us to reverse. So we've got to make sure that when we're travelling that we've pulled that across. The next thing we've got to do is make sure, now that we're attached to the car and the car's got its handbrake assembly running and on, is we drop the brake off and drop the little cog, basically the little wedge, back this way so it doesn't get caught up. Now I'll put on the power cord last, because first of all, if you've got a boat with two safety chains, get your safety chains and take the one from this side of the trailer and put it on that side of your tow bar assembly. Get them on. You can do them finger tight. Very rare they work loose. If you are doing a long trip, for sure, make some other sort of arrangement where you can actually put in a small zip tie if you're worried, or do them up with a set of pliers. Safety chains are now on. And as you can see here, I've got them crossed over. Now, this is a good way to reduce a lot of slack if you have them dragging too low and perhaps they're touching on the road, in which case you probably should get them shortened anyway. But what happens now, if for some unfortunate reason the trailer becomes detached from the car, it jumps off of here and it lands in there. It can't go any further. It will land right in the middle, and it'll keep that drawbar up off the bitumen, because once that's down there and burrowing in, digging through that bitumen, there's going to be all sorts of problems trying to handle the big rig. Now it's time to fit our power plug. Now, generally speaking, we've got a long enough lead to handle most situations. Sometimes it can be too long, and rather than shorten it, put that on last and lay it in and let it sit on top of the trailer chains. That helps keep it up off the bitumen, and once you wear that through, it's too short then and you're going to be in all sorts of trouble rewiring a trailer. Before we insert it into the plug on the car, into the socket on the car, give it a bit of a spray with some sort of waterproofing type treatment. And this one is one of those that's actually it's TEP, but it's a lanolin-based product, so it's quite good to spray around engines. It won't attack plastics. That's pretty important because if you use it under your engine cowl on your outboard motor, you don't want all the little plastic accessories in there being eaten away. Now we install that into the plug assembly. That's locked on nice and tight. We make sure that's sitting nicely there as well. Well, we're almost ready to roll, and a couple of fine tuning touches that we'll put on this before we do. If you've got an issue where perhaps your trailer light lead is a little too long, think about a couple of these, just the standard zip tie that you get from your hardware shop. Have a bundle of those in your boat. They're quite handy for anchor releases. You get them all different sizes, but what we do at this point of time now is install it and go through both chains where they cross over and then go over the wiring itself. Now it's ready to roll. That's fine. If you want to get rid of some of that banging and crashing and the knocking that transmits the noise through the whole of the car, have a look at this adjustment that you have up here on the trailer hitch. You'll see it's got a screw and a bolt assembly to lock it. What we do now is tighten it down. You'll probably need a stubby screwdriver if you've got a spare wheel on the back of your vehicle. And once you tighten that down, it pulls a little clamp up inside and helps sandwich the ball of the tow bar into the hitch itself, and that stops a lot of the knocking. That, coupled with a good dob of heavy duty wheel bearing grease, will stop a lot of that noise. Once we've got it to the right tension, make sure that you do it up tight. And if you do it up very tight on the screw, it may well be that you can't lift this off even with a jockey wheel. So you might need to readjust it later on. Now if you're going on a long trip, do it up tight to begin with, especially if you've got grease in there, and it'll make it a lot more difficult for this hitch to accidentally jump off the back of your car. If you've driven down the highway on the way to holidays or perhaps your fishing trip and you've seen boats or caravans getting towed along and they're whipping away on the back of a car, dragging the back of the car around, that guy or those people are in big strife. It all comes back to the way the trailer's loaded, and in general we need a fair bit of weight on this particular section on the drawbar of the car. Now the maker of your car will offer you that information in your car manual, in your workshop or owner's manual. Generally it's somewhere between 50 and 150 kilos. I think this one's about 120 kilo, and if you've got that weight on there, it will reduce a lot of the noise and the stress and the clattering between the hitch and the ball. Now, the other way to reduce all of this noise and make this trailer actually tow nice and straight is to have a longer drawbar. This particular make of trailer comes standard with a slightly longer drawbar. It makes it a lot easier to tow, but very importantly, it makes it a lot easier to reverse, simply because you've got more distance between this point and the centre of the axles. Well, that's the hitching section taken care of. Let's look now at how a boat is tied down to the trailer. Pretty important stuff. I've seen a few boats dumped off and thrown around the place, sitting on top of cars and all that sort of thing. Trouble is they're on the highway and not on the water. So how do we tie a boat down? You'll find that a lot of trailers have different tie down areas, but there really is only, in this sort of boat, in this sort of trailer boat, there is only 3 places to tie a boat down. And that is on the bow section here, right at the front, or down at the transom section on each side, or one across the total back of the boat. If we start tying down the front section anywhere past or anywhere aft or backwards or astern of this particular frontal section, we're going to find that that tie down actually pulls the boat and it pulls the gunnels downwards. Now what we have is a situation where there's a certain amount of flex, even in a brilliant trailer like this, there is a certain amount of flex, and if the boat can't rock freely on top of those rollers, something has to give. And usually in a lighter boat, especially an aluminium pressed plate boat, you'll find that the thing that gives is the thwart seats that go across. You'll get cracks in the transom, all sorts of other structural problems. So we need to tie it in one particular spot. The winch is not too bad. This one you'll see is a little bit loose, and that was just from the trip up here. And we've only been driving for an hour and a half on a bitumen road. So imagine what's going to happen when you get out onto the dirt and the rough roads and non-bitumen type areas. So we have a safety chain, and that chain attaches to the hull. Make sure it's attached somewhere nice and strong, and you can see another option down the bottom where you can run a chain set up and keep pulling this down onto those rollers. So we need to make sure and continually check when we're out and about, especially on a long trip. Every time you stop for smoko, or perhaps you stop to refuel, go do a run around, have a checklist on your trailer. You need to check your hitches, your chains. You need to check this forward point as well. So we've got a set up where we have that as our first tie down section. Okay, let's look at the aft end, or the stern. It's tie down time here as well, and as you can see, rather than run a strap right across the transom and interfere with my fuel and wiring looms and everything else in this convoluted tubing, I opt to put it onto one handrail here, and perhaps if I wanted to do a little bit more heavy duty, I could run that rope up onto the heavy duty cleat. So by doing it one to one here, I don't get this seesawing effect when the boat rocks on the trailer, which is pretty important because paint's not cheap. 2-pack paint, it's a good paint job, so we'll keep it that way as long as we can. So what you can see here is a series of half hitches. I'm using this braided type rope. It's extremely strong for its thickness. It's easy on the hand, and it doesn't slip very easily either. So I've attached it to the little anchoring point down on the bottom of the trailer. Eventually I'm going to rub some paint off here, but that's life. A few sandbars and rock bars will rub that off anyway. So I've tied it down onto the port side and the starboard side by using this rope onto that anchorage point. That's the strongest way to tie it down. As you can imagine, there's a fair bit of weight in these outboard motors. All of them weigh quite a bit, especially once you get up into the horsepower. So what we need to do is support it correctly so that we can take some of the strain off the transom of the boat. With aluminium, if aluminium bends to and fro continuously, it will work harden, get brittle and crack. Fiberglass weakens as well. All the timbers and the underlays of the fiberglass and the rovings, they start to fall apart and shatter. So we need to support the engine. Now, as you can see, we've got a drop down clip on this one, and when we lower it, it comes down to a certain area, a certain spot, and locks on tight. It is not a good idea to trailer your boat using that particular mechanism. It's really only there to support the leg, keep it up out of the way perhaps if you're on a mooring, or just to keep the leg up off the concrete at home in the driveway. So what we need to do is use some other sort of system. Now if you go to your boat shop, you can get a spring-loaded attachment that has a fork that sits onto the bottom of the engine leg, and it goes through to some sort of attachment on the trailer. They're quite good. But what I've done, considering that I've do a lot of off-road work, and this particular boat from Australian Master Marine will be going all over Australia, and a fair bit of bush bashing as well, what I've done is manufactured a particular strut to suit the boat. Now the beauty of having a custom-built boat like this one is that you can tailor it to suit your needs, and it fits you like a glove. Everything on this boat is exactly how I want it, and I don't want for anything else. It's fantastic. So what I've done at the point of manufacture is I've put this lug onto the transom of the boat, and that allows me to attach this particular piece of gear, which I made up. It's just a piece of Gauve water pipe that I've painted. It's got a fork in the front, it's got a bracket on the other end, a locking pin, and a retainer so the pin can't slide out. And what I do is I install that onto the back, like so. Make sure the pin's all the way down, and lower the engine down. And there we have it. I also install this, and it's a rubber strap that allows it to be held against the engine leg. Should this come away from the engine leg, you don't want it dragging around and bouncing around on the road. It'll flick up and do all sorts of damage here. Now the good part about this is that that engine and the boat rock as one on the trailer. They're not working against each other like they would if this was attached to the trailer. If you have a look into your manual, you'll see in the breakdown diagram there's lots of nylon bushings in this particular part of the outboard swivel hub, and they are protected by having this sort of system. Now that's the beauty of having a custom built boat. It's fantastic to be able to set it up so that you can trailer it and get it to do what you want it to do.